say, it stirs up a lot of feelings and emotions because when I was a senior, Nils was my roommate. He was a sophomore. It was the first time that Syracuse allowed us to get apartments off campus, and it was a big deal for me, but it was an even bigger deal for an underclassman. So I don't know what he learned from me out here at the boathouse or on the water, but I think he learned a lot from me being my roommate. He used to write things I said on the telephone on the wall because he thought he could learn things that way. But when he says about getting more education, you got to understand that Nils has a MBA, a PhD, and I think 2 law degrees. Is that correct, Nils?
More or less.
More or less. So he knows about more education and has served him very well. And he's a very intelligent man, so anything he says, you got to take some heed of what he says. So I really think that rowing in beautiful fours like these is a great attribute for you to have. When we were here, any fours we had were pretty old. I didn't get to row in a 4 while I was here. I was always in the 8s. I rowed in a 4 during the summer. I won a Canadian Henley, and the varsity coach at the time didn't like that. He thought it might give me bad habits. I don't think it did, but instead of being welcomed and rewarded, he looked at me askance. So I think rowing in small boats, as I learned after I left here, pairs and eventually singles and doubles and everything else, is a great way to get speed and get more agility in a boat. Learn how powerful you can be. Some of you may know the name Drew Harrison, who was a coach here. He was a very successful freshman coach, won several IRAs, was my pair partner for a while, back when we were rowing a pair width. Now, I don't know if I don't think they do a pair width anymore, but you want to talk about a back-breaking row, that was really something else. And the only good thing about it was that I got to row bow. This gave me a little bit of leverage on him, and he was taller than I was. But it's unfortunate he's not here, because I would say the only thing that helped him is he had more gas than I had, and he would appreciate that. See, hopefully someone will tell him about that. When I was coaching, when I got close to retiring from my regular job with the city of Rochester, I started coaching, and I got to the point where I could give some pep talks. Kids would often say, "Coach, give us a pep talk." And one that seemed to work was I would kind of paraphrase a scene from the movie Miracle on 34th Street, where I don't know if you're familiar with this pretty old movie. They've redone it a couple of times, but there's a little girl whose mother has tried to teach her to be practical, and that miracles don't happen. That you've got to take things as they are; they just add up. And the little girl goes to see Santa Claus at Macy's, and Santa Claus tells her that she will get the things that she asks for, but she has to believe. And so, I don't know if you're aware of it, but for a long time, Macy's did a promo about believe, I believe. And so the little girl gets to the point of wanting to believe in miracles. And she has a little meeting with the guy who played Santa Claus. His name was Chris Kringle in the movie. And he tells her about, there's the French nation and the British nation, and there's the imagination. And I always found that part interesting, because you read about rowing and training at the highest levels, but people always talk about not just training your bodies and your various systems, your VO2 max system and everything else, but you got to train your mind. You got to get to the point where you truly believe that you can win the race, that you can overcome not only the other team, but yourself. So I always get a kick when I see this movie that the little girl starts believing that Kris Kringle is really Santa Claus. And her belief causes her to write a letter to Santa Claus. And because there's a whole big story going on around this, and the guy who's interested in her mother winds up having to defend Kris Kringle in court as to being Santa Claus. There's all kinds of story about this, and I recommend you see this sometime because it's really quite a moving movie. I watch it every Christmas time. It always cheers me up a little bit. But in the end, he actually proves that Kris Kringle, and then Gwen won an Academy Award, is Santa Claus. And the little girl believes. And so I would often tell my young crew guys this story about believing, so they would believe they could win. And they were some of these crews were pretty good, and they actually would win. And they would think that there was something to what I told. So I thought that was it was worthwhile telling the story. And then there's another story, a little briefer one, hopefully, about Newt Rockne, All-American, where there's a guy, some of you may know his name, Ronald Reagan. Not that I agree with all his politics, but he was a half-bad actor sometimes, and he played George Gift, who was part of the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame. And later on in the movie, he becomes sick, and someone goes to him and tells him Notre Dame's got this real tough game, and he tells him, win one for the Gipper. So and of course they go back, and of course it's all Hollywoodized, but they actually do. Notre Dame wins one for the Gipper. So I hope that it's always been traditional when you're in a tough race, you're going down the course, you take 10 for the stroke, 10 for the 3 minute, 10 for the 2 minute, 10 for the bow, 10 for the coxswain. And so maybe when you're in a tough race, you need 10 more for Pappy. Go Chiefs.